Tonight, on Reporting Scotland, convicted of the sexual abuse of 3 children and a student priest.
Are they lying?
No, they're not lying. They think that that's what it is.
Confronted by a BBC investigations team, retired priest Father Francis Moore continued to deny he'd ever abused anyone. Calls for Fife Council to erect a memorial for babies whose ashes were never returned to their families after their deaths.
Every Christmas, every birthday, me and my kids, my family could go along and pay our respects. They need to do a memorial for the lost babies.
Also on the programme. The senior finance officer claims she was frozen out after highlighting a misuse of funds at the Scottish Police Authority. Scottish football faces accusations it's sweeping sectarianism under the carpet. And Nicola Sturgeon meets the Prime Minister in Downing Street, but still no agreement on devolved powers after Brexit. Good evening. A retired priest has been found guilty of sexually abusing 3 children and a student priest. 82-year-old Father Paul Moore committed the crimes in various locations in Ayrshire between 1977 and 1996. The judge condemned his actions as appalling abuse of young children. Katrina Renton was at the High Court.
Father Moore?
Father Paul Moore confronted by BBC Scotland in 2015 over allegations he sexually abused young boys.
They say they are victims of abuse at your hands.
No,
Are you saying
no,
they are lying?
I absolutely
Are they lying?
No, they're not lying. They think that that's what it is.
He always denied he abused his position of trust and power as a priest, but today, at the age of 82, he was convicted of sexually abusing children and a student priest in crimes spanning more than 20 years. One of his victims was just 5 years old. He told the court how Father Moore sexually assaulted him at St Mark's Primary School in Irvine in 1977. Nowadays, one of the crimes committed against the child would be classed as rape. Paul Smythe waived his anonymity when he spoke to the BBC in 2015. He said it was on Irvine Beach where Father Moore sexually abused him on 2 occasions when he was between 10 and 13 years old.
I was a naughty boy, and he used to take us down the beach, and one Sunday there was just myself and him, and that's where the abuse happened.
Another man was abused as a child at a leisure centre. The crimes against the children were committed in Ayrshire in the late 1970s and early 80s. And in 1995, Father Moore struck again, this time abusing a student priest.
Paul Moore went to see his bishop, the Bishop of Galloway, Maurice Taylor, in 1996. He is now 92 and came to court to give evidence. He was shown personnel records that he'd taken at the time. In them, he noted that Paul Moore had said he had sexual involvement with 2 males who were no longer underage, but had been when the incident occurred. Paul Moore said he wanted to sort himself out and stop living as 2 personalities.
Bishop Taylor sent Father Moore to this residential centre in Toronto.
The religious and the clergy are always helping others, and so we try to help them.
A place set up to address the needs of clergy with addictions and mental health issues. On his return, he was sent to Fort Augustus Abbey near Inverness. The attached school, notorious for allegations of child abuse, was by then closed. And the bishop ruled Paul Moore was not allowed to deal with parishioners again. In a statement, Bishop William Nolan, the current Bishop of Galloway, said the Catholic Church has cooperated with the police investigation. He said, "I feel very much for those who have suffered. I am conscious too that their pain has been exacerbated by this long wait for justice, and that we are only now able to offer a full and proper apology."
Today, the judge, Lady Ray, told Paul Moore that he had abused his position as a priest in the most horrible manner. She said that she could see no alternative to prison when she sentences him next month. And then he was led away. Some of the jurors wept as they delivered their verdicts.
Father Paul Moore, a man whose life was meant to be about serving God, is now set to serve time in prison. Katrina Renton reporting Scotland at the High Court in Glasgow.
Fife Council is being threatened with court action over its refusal to erect a dedicated memorial to babies whose ashes were never returned to their families. The local authority has apologised for past practice, but says existing memorials for infants can be used. Jackie O'Brien reports.
It's almost 30 years since this baby John was lost to cot death at 4 months old. His mother, who has since moved from Fife to the Highlands, was told that there would be no ashes. But in 2013, a BBC Scotland investigation discovered that they had in fact been dispersed on the grounds of Dunfermline's council-run crematorium.
Who scattered his ashes? It wasn't me or my family. It was some stranger. You wouldn't even want that for your pets, would you? Never mind your child, your gorgeous little baby.
Fife Council has apologised for the anguish caused by past practices, but it's failed to compensate all parents or erect a dedicated memorial for 13 local infants, measures adopted by other Scottish local authorities following an official investigation into a nationwide baby ashes scandal.
We're not even at stage one, let alone the end of the process where we are with so many other local authorities. Why is that? What are they playing at? Is it political? Or is it just simply heartlessness and callousness?
In a statement, Fife Council says that it already has specific baby areas with memorials at its crematoria and cemeteries. These areas, it says, were developed and managed in conjunction with the bereavement charity SANS. The authority says it would be happy to work with any parent who wishes to have their baby's name added to any of the existing memorials.
If I had had that chance 30 years ago, my son's name would always be there. Every Christmas, every birthday, me and my kids, my family could go along and pay our respects. My son would have been laid to rest in peace. And because of what they've done, no, they need to do a memorial for the lost babies.
The affected families warn that court action is their next step, unless Fife Council has a change of heart.
It's time that we be allowed to let our babies rest in peace. Why can't we do that? Why can't we just let them rest in peace?
Jackie O'Brien reporting Scotland, Inverness.
A senior finance officer at the body which oversees Police Scotland claims she's been frozen out after highlighting the potential misuse of public funds. Amy MacDonald, who still works for the Scottish Police Authority, had questioned payments totalling several £100,000, but says her concerns were never acted upon. Our Home Affairs correspondent, Riva Alderson, reports.
Helping consolidate the accounting functions within Police Scotland.
Amy MacDonald, Director of Financial Accountability at the SPA. She claims her concerns over extraordinary payments were ignored, so she went to Audit Scotland, the body overseeing public spending. Blowing the whistle in that fashion has led Amy MacDonald to take a case to the Employment Tribunal over the way she's been treated by the SPA.
The Employment Tribunal, which sits in the building behind me, will hear how Amy MacDonald highlighted to her bosses a series of payments totalling hundreds of thousands of pounds made to senior figures within the police service, which she believed had been improperly made. She'll tell the tribunal that when she blew the whistle, she was then frozen out by her SPA bosses.
Amy MacDonald's lawyer says she hopes the tribunal will rule she's been unfairly treated, but there's a wider reason for bringing the case.
What it is hoped is that it makes things easier for other whistleblowers and that they, unlike my client, don't need to ventilate their concerns in an employment tribunal. Allied to that, there is a culture where workers are actually encouraged rather than discouraged from reporting wrongdoing, particularly when we're talking about public funds.
Deputy Chief Constable Rose Fitzpatrick's the only person who received disputed money whom BBC Scotland can name. She received £67,000 in relocation expenses and also had £53,000 in tax paid for her by the SPA. There's no suggestion she did anything wrong. Audit Scotland criticised the SPA for its unacceptable use of taxpayers' money, saying it didn't represent a good use of public funds. 5 other former senior SPA and police figures also received money, which Amy MacDonald queried. BBC Scotland is unable to name these individuals or the sums of money they received because of an anonymity order granted by the tribunal. MSPs have already criticised the SPA's lack of transparency in its financial management. The chair of the Public Audit Committee says it'll continue to investigate despite recent changes at the top of the authority.
We want to make sure that we get some answers on what has happened before. We'll be inviting the whistleblower in to give evidence in public to the Audit Committee as soon as this tribunal is finished.
The SPA is contesting the case and says it'll be publishing an independent audit report about the payments. Reval Alderson reporting Scotland, Glasgow.
An Aberdeenshire man has been convicted of planning terrorism attacks. 25-year-old Conor Ward denied breaching the Terrorism Act during a 5-week trial at the High Court in Edinburgh. The court heard he acquired components for potential bombs at properties in Banff and kept a list of Scottish mosque addresses. Sentence was deferred for background reports. Scottish football is facing accusations of sweeping sectarianism under the carpet. Officials employed by the league to report sectarian abuse say when the abuse is highlighted, nothing is being done. BBC Scotland has learned at least 4 top-flight clubs have been reported this season alone. Our senior football reporter Chris McLaughlin has this exclusive report.
Scottish football has a reputation for passion, commitment and fierce rivalry. But at times the rivalry strays into something more sinister. Sectarianism was once described by the country's First Minister as Scotland's secret shame. As part of the game's commitment to tackling it, match delegates are employed by the league to monitor singing. But some of those delegates who have asked to remain anonymous have told us they continually report the problem and nothing is done. One former official told me, "I know that some of the delegates who are still working today are absolutely appalled. It seems like the SPFL are content to just sweep the issue under the carpet." The SPFL responded saying it works hard with stakeholders to fight sectarianism. Now, this season alone, at least 4 clubs have been reported by match delegates for fans singing sectarian or offensive songs. We have managed to get our hands on some of those reports and they make for some very interesting reading. In this one, there are details of songs sung in support of the IRA. In this one, there are details of songs of an anti-Catholic nature. Now, the Scottish Government have asked the SPFL to release these figures to the public. So far, they have refused. That comes as no surprise to those who have tried to hold them to account.
They seem to think that they're a body above all others and that the rules do not apply to them the same way as they apply to every other organisation. They're organisations who receive taxpayers' money. They're organisations who receive the ordinary person's money every week, and they've got a duty of care to these people.
In 2006 and 2007, the then SPL vowed to get tough on sectarian singing. There were threats of fines, points deductions and even stadium closures. But despite the warnings, no significant sanctions were ever imposed. The fear is the problem could drive some fans away from games.
I don't take my son to. I haven't gone to Rangers or Celtic games against Kilmarnock because of the poison. I think it's poison.
I think it's been an issue for a long time. I don't think it's quite as bad now as it's been.
It's certainly not Scottish football's sole responsibility to eradicate sectarianism from Scottish life, but many believe it should play its part, especially given those who are asked to report on it say the current system is just not working. Banishing the shame from Scotland's game was never going to be easy, but there are those who just want a fighting chance. Chris McLaughlin, reporting Scotland, Hampden Park.
The family of a toddler who was murdered by a young boy have warned against raising the age of criminal responsibility. The Scottish Government has published a bill today with plans to increase it from the age of 8 to 12. That's been welcomed by many, but the cousin of Jamie Campbell says victims' rights must come first. Our political correspondent Andrew Kerr has the story.
He's called the forgotten Jamie Bulger. This is 3-year-old Jamie Campbell, taken from his granny's home in Drumchapel in 1990 and murdered by Richard Keith, who was only 11 at the time. As a new bill is published to increase the age of criminal responsibility from 8 to 12, Jamie's cousin says their views and rights are being ignored.
It's very angering for my family and it's disrespectful, and I just feel it's ridiculous because there's precedents there to show that there is child killers, there will be in the future, and you're basically putting that message out there to say that you can do these things and you will not be held responsible for it. And I think that's a huge message from the Scottish Government, and for them to go ahead with that, I think it's ridiculous and I think it's terrible.
With the age of criminal responsibility currently at 8, that's the lowest in Europe. Children can have a criminal record from then. It's 10 in England and Wales. The bill would take the age of criminal responsibility up to 12, the age children can be prosecuted in court in Scotland. The minister in charge of this has sympathy for Jamie Campbell's family.
And I would want to reassure them that we are continuing to take these cases very, very seriously. There will be consequences for these children, but the aim will be to try to turn their lives around so that they are not behaving in a criminal way in future.
But the Children's Commissioner thinks the age of responsibility should be even higher.
Over a decade ago, the UN said that 12 was the absolute minimum internationally and called on states to go to at least 14 or 16 before using criminal responses to children and young people's behaviour.
Perhaps going up to 16 seems too much of a jump just now, but going up to 12 will attract cross-party support, although the Conservatives are saying the government has to be careful.
We have to look at the impact on children, we have to look at the age of criminal responsibility, but we mustn't forget the victim in all of this, and their rights are just as important as those of the young person.
Only about 200 children under 12 are dealt with by the law every year, mostly for low-level offences. But those whose lives have been blighted by major crime suggest that their rights should always be regarded. Andrew Kerr, reporting Scotland, Holyrood.
It's 14 minutes to 7. A reminder now of tonight's main story. A retired priest has been found guilty of sexually abusing 3 children and a student priest between 1977 and 1996. And still to come, Gregor Townsend rings the changes for Rome as Scotland aim to end the Six Nations on a high. The Prime Minister and the First Minister have just finished talks in Downing Street over the EU withdrawal bill and the devolution of powers after Brexit. That's which powers returning from Brussels stay at Westminster and which go to Holyrood. Well, no breakthrough has been reached, but Nicola Sturgeon said with cooperation she hopes one can be struck soon. Here's our Westminster correspondent, Nick Earley.
Arriving in Downing Street to try and end the Brexit stalemate. Should the UK government assume control of some devolved powers, or is that, as Nicola Sturgeon thinks, a power grab? One UK government source said the remaining differences between the sides amounts to a constitutional pinhead dance, but Nicola Sturgeon has real concerns that this would give UK ministers too much power in devolved areas. With no legal guarantee, it would only be temporary. And in the Commons this afternoon, language that shows the two sides see this very differently. The SNP say it's an attack on the Scottish Parliament.
They're happy to systematically destroy the settlement that the Parliament thrives on. I call upon the Prime Minister once again, stop this attack on devolution.
The Prime Minister says most powers will go to Edinburgh.
Prime Minister! The right honourable gentleman. This is a government that has actually given more powers to the Scottish Government. This is a government that will be giving more powers to the Scottish Government. Significant extra powers will be devolved to the Scottish and Welsh governments as a result of the decisions that we're taking around Brexit.
Away from parliamentary theatre, talking has continued, and the First Minister sounded cautiously optimistic as she left number 10.
The issues that remain between us are not insignificant, but neither are they insurmountable. And I think with understanding and goodwill on both sides, and there has already been movement on both sides, then I think a deal can be reached. That's not to say there is certainty at this stage that it will be reached.
For now, talking to end that stalemate, to find a deal, goes on. Nick Earley reporting Scotland, Downing Street.
Well, let's go to our Westminster correspondent, David Porter, who's in Downing Street. David, sounding a bit more positive than normal. How close do you think they are to breaking this deadlock?
Jackie, no deal yet, but I think quite frankly no one was going to expect there to be a deal today. But certainly the mood music or the language after the meeting was perhaps a bit more upbeat and optimistic than some of us were expecting. And I think in part that may have been because of the way the meeting was structured. What happened was that they discussed what had happened with Russia and the security situation and the events that happened in Salisbury. So we had a situation where the meeting started off on an area of agreement. They then moved on to Brexit, and as we heard Nicola Sturgeon saying there, she said the changes, the differences between the two sides were not insurmountable, but they were not as significant as some people had thought. She also went on to say a deal could be done, and people were working to try and achieve that. From the UK government's point of view, they're also sounding quite optimistic.
Well, today was an important meeting whereby further understanding was gained of each other's position. I think we're quite close. But there's more work to be done, and I don't want to underestimate the challenges that are in front of us either. But there is a genuine will on both sides to want to get to an agreement.
So does that mean a deal will be done? No, not necessarily. There's still an awful lot of hard talking. The differences may not be terribly wide, but I think they are quite deep. But Jackie, I get the sense there is a window of opportunity, but just because there is a sense of an opportunity, it does not necessarily mean that both sides will take it.
Thank you very much, David. Well, in the last few minutes, MSPs have begun another late-night session at Holyrood to try to get through a long list of amendments to their version of the Brexit Bill. Our political editor, Brian Taylor, joins us. Brian, firstly, remind us what this bill aims to do.
Yeah, Jackie, it's stopgap legislation designed to transfer EU powers into Scots law in the event that there's no deal across the UK from those talks that David was talking about just a minute ago. Critics say it's a stunt. Scottish ministers say it's sensible planning.
What's the latest?
Well, they've just clocked on for the night shift after working all day. They're ploughing through 231 amendments to the bill. We can see Jackson Carlo there for the Conservatives putting forward his point of view. The Tories pretty well against this legislation. They think it's unnecessary. There's also a row, Jackie, over one element of the bill which is allowing to keep pace with any future changes in EU rules, should that be necessary. Now, that power to do that, to keep pace, would be in ministerial hands, not Parliament's. Opposition MSPs none too happy about that. Ministers say it would only be used in special circumstances. It's simply a backstop that's necessary to match any changes in the EU law. Jackie, all that effort, all that talking, all that negotiation, you know what, it could be in vain if that UK deal goes ahead.
Thank you very much, Brian. Well, now some Brexit arts news. Edinburgh's International Festival has said uncertainties over Brexit are having an impact on planning future events. Launching this year's programme, its director has raised concerns about the difficulties of securing artists.
We just, at the moment, don't know how the public finances will be. We don't know what the situation with visas will be. And it becomes very, very difficult for us to begin to have conversations 3 or 4 years hence. Obviously, we'll continue to do everything we can. And I think there's enormous support for us internationally with our colleagues because they recognise the difficulty.
Well, non-Brexit rugby now, and head coach Gregor Townsend says it's important Scotland round off their Six Nations campaign with victory over Italy to avoid undoing the progress they've made in this year's tournament. Gregor Townsend today named his team for the trip to Rome and has shaken things up a bit, as Andy Burke explains.
One last team selection for the Scotland head coach in this season's Six Nations. But with the title now gone, how important is the final match against Italy?
To lose 2 games in a row would be disappointing. To lose your last game, it's never enjoyable because it's a few weeks and months before you get the squad back. And I think it would be progress. It would show that the players have learned from what's going on in the Championship if we were to get a win, because we know this will be a tough game.
Consistency has been the hallmark of Gregor Townsend's recent team selections. Indeed, over the course of the last 3 matches in this competition, he's made a combined total of just 1 change. But ahead of this trip to Rome, he's decided to replace a third of his starting team. There are 5 changes to the team in all from the defeat in Dublin. In the backs, Tommy Seymour returns to replace Blair Kinghorn on the wing, while centre Nick Gregg is handed his first Six Nations start. In the pack, WP Nell and Fraser Brown come into the front row, with Tim Swinson coming into the second row.
It's a freshened up team, but 5 changes, it's not as dramatic as Wales did with the 10 changes last weekend, and they still came through and won comfortably enough. It's an expression of confidence in the squad, and they obviously believe they're going to win in Italy, and they're taking the chance to look at a couple of people and also to give some people maybe a bit of a rest at the end of the championship, because they know they've got some big games coming up for Edinburgh and Glasgow as well.
Scotland have won on their last 3 visits to Rome. Nothing less is expected this time around. Andy Burt reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
Nice to watch, isn't it? Now, time for the weather, and Christopher's looking to the stars.
Oh, we are indeed, Jackie. Thank you very much. Hello there, good evening to you. Yes, a chance of seeing the Aurora Borealis tonight, but only really if you're in the northernmost parts of Scotland. And the one thing that's going to hamper your chances is the amount of cloud that's forecast. You can see it there, and it has been a pretty cloudy day across the board. Some interesting ones, though, some mammatus clouds captured by one of our weather watchers in Falkirk earlier, given their name due to their undulating nature. And not only cloudy skies, wet for some, you can see on the radar the outbreaks of rain we've had across western parts, but over the next few hours, that rain will tend to ease off. It stays cloudy for most, though, overnight, and indeed windy, with a fresh to strong south-southeasterly touching gale force around the coast, but actually reasonably mild overnight, frost-free, 5 to 8 Celsius. So tomorrow, and it's another cloudy and indeed windy day. Large area of low pressure out in the northeast Atlantic. You can see ahead of it the tightly spaced isobars indicating windy conditions and a weather front bringing yet further outbreaks of rain. So cloudy once again for many of us, with fresh to strong southeasterlies, and the rain in the southwest starting to edge its way eastwards through the course of the day, mainly across the hills through the southern uplands and high ground to the north of the central belt, but there'll be a few splashes through central areas as well. So windy once again from the southeast, temperatures around 7 to 9 Celsius, so a little bit cooler than today, but not as cold as what's coming. And there you can see that rain across the high ground in towards parts of Grampian, snow on the very highest peaks. Towards the northwest, well, some sunshine here, anywhere from Skye up towards Ullapool and through Lewis and Harris. Elsewhere, cloudy, largely dry. Rest of the afternoon into the evening, and we start to see that wet weather turning increasingly wintry, and we have a Met Office yellow be aware warning in force for the risk of snow and ice in this area here, because through the course of Friday, yet further wet weather and some snow to increasingly low levels through the day. Away from here, reasonably dry but colder, 4 degrees there as the high in Aberdeen. And that cold theme with us as we go into the weekend. High pressure towards Scandinavia. That means we've got a bitingly cold easterly wind, and it really will be chilly no matter where you are, but especially so if you're in exposure to that wind. The risk of snow, but actually the greatest risk is south of the border. It will be feeling, though, bitterly cold no matter where you are. That's the forecast for now.
Thank you, Christopher. And that's Reporting Scotland. I'm back with the headlines and with our main bulletin in the evening at 10:30. Until then, from all the team, goodbye.